where do all of these basic building blocks come from to make NAD and FAD? And shockingly, guys, that's food. Ta-da. The breakdown of food, the movement of food, the absorption of the nutrients within food, the transportation of those nutrients around the body. That's going to be the digestive system's problem to solve. It's their function, as well as the cardiovascular system as well, because we absorb this stuff and we get it into the blood, and the blood helps to transport all these building blocks down and around the body. We need food for everything to build things: DNA, RNA, proteins, triglycerides, cellular structures, cellular components, antibodies, red blood cells. We need food to provide all of this raw material, if you will, that provide the building blocks for all the things in our cells, in our body, and to provide a good chunk of ATP in which to fund all of these actions that we're going to be talking about. The great thing about a cell, there's always a huge turnover, all right? And I am not asking these numbers, so don't worry about, I'm just there. It's just there to kind of give you an idea. I'm not going to ask you. I don't expect you to know those turnover rates at all. Okay, let's let Andy back in. There we go. All right. The great thing is I can store some of this stuff. Okay. I can store some of my excess nutrients of carbohydrates. I can store some of my excess nutrients of fats. Okay. What's the storage form of carbohydrate in a human? Anybody know? Starts with a G.
Glycogen.
Oh yeah, there you go. Okay. So you can store a little bit of that. You store it in your liver, and then you store it in your skeletal muscles. You can a little bit in cardiac muscle as well, but we think of really the liver and skeletal muscles as your biggest reservoirs of stored carbohydrate, glycogen. Once you fill up those stores, guess what all that extra carbohydrates gets converted into?
Fat?
Yep, the F word. Okay. The F word around your midsection. Hips and thighs, buttocks, all those lovely places where you deposit those fat stores. Okay. Triglycerides, fat. We have some inclusion bodies that can store a little bit of that, but again, we just convert it into the F word. Okay. Does the body have a ability to store proteins? Nitrogen?
Not really.
Body has no ability to do that. Okay, nitrogen's just hanging out are very bad. Okay, we convert it into urea, and you pee it out. So where does extra or excess protein go if it's not being broken down? What do we convert it into?
Energy?
Energy. What do we convert it in if we're not going to use it?
ATP?
What do we change it into if we're not going to utilize it? The F word.
Fat.
Fat. Shockingly, we had to have a study. A study came out like 2 years ago saying that, okay, if you eat too much carbohydrates, it turns into fat. If you eat too much fat, it turns into fat. And shocking, if you eat too much protein, once you deanimate it and get rid of some of that excess, it gets converted into fat. If you consume more calories than you're putting out, you always convert it to the F word. Now, the process to do that is a little bit different. super easy for fat to be converted into adipose. Kind of easy for carbohydrates to get stored as fat. Proteins takes a little bit of extra. Okay, and it's different and it has some unique characteristics to it. But it's why protein consumption is such a fascinating research field, because we don't have a true ability to store protein. Okay, we make things, we get rid of the rest, we convert whatever's there to fat. Okay, but there's no true way, like with carbohydrates, to convert it into something in which to store it for long-term use. So how much protein you get, I mean, if you're a big protein eater, if you're one of those individuals on that carnivore diet, get off of it. But if you're one of those carnivore people, you consume a hell of a lot of protein and really nothing else. You know, all you do is urinate a lot of it out. Unless you're going to be bodybuilding, physical labor, you're just sitting around on your couch, listening to lectures all day, probably not the best diet for you. Some nutrients the body can make. There are some vitamins that the body can make. Right? There are some amino acids that the body can make. But there are the majority of nutrients, the majority of carbs, fats, proteins, okay, vitamins and minerals, they are essential because I have to go out and find these in my diet and shovel them in my mouth. When it comes to protein, that's usually a pretty good one in terms of some are essential, some are not essential. The non-essential ones you can make. The essential ones are here. And there's a mnemonic. It's something that gets asked quite a bit. I don't know why. Private Tim Hill. I'll make these big L's. Okay. Phenylalanine, valine, and you can use whatever you want there. Tryptophan. Threonine, isoleucine, methionine, HI is histidine, leucine, lysine. Private Tim Hill. Those are your essential amino acids. Those are generally all the only ones that anybody ever asks of you to really know, because the rest of them your body can make. Now, there are some that are conditional. Just pretend you didn't hear that. Man in black yourself. Okay. You also have 3 different types of fatty acids. You have omega-3, you have omega-6, you have omega-9. Your body can make omega-9. So it's not something that's essential. You don't have to go out and find it and consume it in your diet. But if you don't get any of these amino acids, you have a severe deficiency. Is that a problem here in the States? No. Overseas and in poor countries, yes. You see protein deficiencies all over the place. Do you see it here in the States? Yes. It's called abuse, neglect, okay? In court of law, they use failure to thrive. Just by missing one of those essential amino acids there. It can severely limit the structures that a child can make, even if they get enough fats in their diet. And omega-3 and omega-6 are the ones that they need to consume. That's your fish oil pill that you generally consume. So those are essential nutrients. Okay? These are the essential components that go in to make all of the structures inside our bodies that we've talked about. Vitamins. You may see it in a multiple choice type question. Again, I have niacin and riboflavin, NAD and FAD respectively. But we have a number of other vitamins as well. And sometimes these are fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. And water-soluble vitamins, which are the B vitamins and vitamin C. There are a ton of different vitamin Bs. And I'm not going to really get into every single one of them. Again, the body can make a small amount. Some of the B vitamins can be made, not a whole hell of a lot. You can make vitamin K. You can make vitamin D, generally not enough. That's why you have to make sure you get some of it in your diet as well. But if you just go out into the sunlight with some exposed skin, you can make some vitamin D. These vitamins are important for what they ultimately make. And they make a number of different things to help with cellular metabolism. Okay. Again, these make great multiple choice or matching type of questions. These are your water-soluble vitamins. We don't store these things. Whatever you consume, you urinate out. Whatever you don't use, you urinate out. Okay? So if you take that expensive multivitamin, that's awesome. Okay? Hopefully you needed it. Okay? Because if you're not going to utilize the 1,000+ units in there, you're just going to urinate them all out. Thiamine helps to make the conversion of pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. That's an important step in the transition reaction. We talked about NAD and FAD being important electron carriers. It's going to take those things to the electron transport chain and do a bunch of fantastic things there that we'll see. B6 helps with the utilization of breakdown of amino acids. Okay? And we'll briefly introduce that concept here in chapter 5. Last one is vitamin C. Vitamin C is one of the most potent, along with vitamin E, potent antioxidants. So vitamin C and vitamin E are going to be important. Vitamin E is fat soluble. Those things are going to be important to help get rid of those free radicals that accumulate during the process of cellular respiration. Some of your fat-soluble vitamins here, vitamin E is an antioxidant, again, working in hand with vitamin C. It actually spares vitamin C. So vitamin E has got a lot of fame several years ago when some research came out talking about how potent of an anti-cancer ability it had. And so everybody did mega doses of vitamin E to help prevent cancer. And then a couple years after that study came out, then a number of studies started coming out showing vitamin E actually could cause cancer in high doses. So the moral of the story, just because a little bit is good, a hell of a lot of it is usually bad. And with any vitamin, that's the case. Okay. Niacin, right? Niacin's fantastic. But if you do mega doses of niacin, has anybody ever done mega dose of niacin before? Anybody ever have some fun on a weekend and take mega doses of niacin? Man, it sets your nerves on fire. Okay. Get that niacin flush, potent vasodilator. Everything feels uber sensitive. They put a lot of niacin in pre-workouts and supplements to give you that feeling like something's happening. Yeah, I'm recording, so I'm not going to say a fun story. I'll save it for later when I'm not recording because I don't need anybody to repeat that nonsense. Okay. But there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do with niacin to screw around with people. All right. Vitamin K helps with clotting. Vitamin K is made by bacteria within your intestines. You also get a shot of it day one out of mom's uterus. Vitamin D, really big thing there is there for calcium absorption. It regulates gene expression as well. So it's going to be intimately involved with DNA reading, along with tissue differentiation in terms of some of the turnover that's going to happen there. Vitamin A, its big claim to fame is probably vision. It helps make some of the rods associated with that. So if you go from a dark room to a really bright room, all of a sudden you burn all your rods. So you need a lot of vitamin A to help with the turnover there. And we'll talk about that when we get into special senses. The book goes into every single one of them. I am not going to ask you. Okay, I've underlined some functions. Hopefully those will be the one that you remember because those would be the ones that I would probably ask on an exam. I'm not going to ask you deficiency syndromes. If you're more interested in this, come to nutrition class. Okay, we have a lot of fun there with all this stuff. Minerals, I don't really want to get too deep into because they have a varied number of functions, and some of them are involved with antioxidants. Some of them are involved with building blocks of things, enzyme function. These do a number of different things, but the big thing about these guys is that these are not organic. Okay. So no carbon molecule. Okay. Some you need in really, really large amounts. Some you need in a very, very small amount. Okay. So you can have major minerals and trace minerals. If I was to ask you, and I'm not going to, but for grins and giggles, which one of those major minerals there is associated with higher incidence of high blood pressure? Anybody know?
Magnesium? I don't know.
You guessed. I love it. He's not right.
Sodium?
Who?
Sodium?
Sodium. Sodium and potassium, to be honest, but it's sodium that's the primary offender. So if you consume a lot of sodium, high blood pressure is coming your way. Magnesium helps to relax. Okay. So if you're having trouble with muscles and whatnot, magnesium is generally what you take because it helps with relaxation of muscles. Calcium, obviously bones. Small amount, your trace minerals there, probably the biggest one you've heard of is iron. What's iron involved with? Can anybody throw out a guess?
Blood.
Hemoglobin.
Yep,
Anemia.
blood, hemoglobin. Yeah, heme. So it's going to help to bind oxygen. It's also going to be involved with the red blood cell structure that's also associated with binding carbon dioxide as well. So we'll talk about iron and cardiovascular system. The other ones we don't really get into in this one. Selenium is an antioxidant, if you want to know. Fluoride doesn't really do anything from a growth standpoint. It's involved with mineralization of teeth, but something you can stay away from if you'd like. Zinc is an immune function, so it'll be incorporated into some of the immune cells that we'll talk about later. How much we get into that, I don't know. Chromium is involved with sugar balance. So there's a whole bunch of fun things that these vitamins and minerals do that chapter 19 dives into. I just want you to know that they're non-organic creatures that have a multitude of various different functions. Some you need in really large amounts, some you need in really small amounts. In these chemical reactions, we are going to have creatures, and by creatures, I mean molecules, that when they react, they now have a unpaired number of electrons. These are your free radicals. Okay. These are your free radicals. Now, a little bit of this is a perfectly good thing. Okay. A little bit of this is a perfectly good thing. It'll help us to make things within the electron transport chain that's going to drive that process of cellular respiration. It's going to help us to make some building blocks of nitric oxide. And this is going to help communicate with cells. It's also going to be a really potent vasodilator as well. So it's going to be involved with the immune response. Okay. So a little bit of free radical production is a perfectly good thing. It's when you have an excessive amount of production of these free radicals to where you get a ton of wear and tear. What kind of wear and tear? Wear and tear on cellular structures that reduce the viability of the cell. Cell death. The inflammatory process. Okay. We'll talk about stress. Okay. And the goodness of it. And what happens when you become into this pro-inflammatory state and what that does for other things within the body, especially when it comes to hormones and the immune response. Neurological disease, some wear and tear on nerves. Cardiovascular diseases. We'll talk about this with high blood pressure. Okay? And what that means for the heart and its function and the blood vessels and their function. Who's going to protect you from free radicals? Antioxidants. C. Vitamin E. Glutathione. Those are your big three that help prevent all of that accumulation of free radicals within your cells. Okay. There are a number of other antioxidants. Well, you don't need to know it. I'm just going to put it down for posterity. And those are phytochemicals. There's also a couple zoological chemicals that are found only in animal meat. Phytochemicals are nutrients found within plants. And about all of them, except for maybe 4, are antioxidant in function. So to help prevent all that excessive wear and tear, vitamin C, vitamin E, some fantastic glutathione. And you can take all those in a supplement if you want. Some people say it's really good. Some people not as much. But you can add that in your pill